For some, war is all about the money, a line on the ledger that adds up to billions of dollars. The U.S. spends more on its military than the rest of the world combined. Behind that battlefield bonanza lie small towns like this one, where what's good for the fight, it's also good for its economic soul. In Anniston, Alabama, it's not just big institutions like the depot. The reach of the battlefield runs through people's lives on many levels.
Left, right.
The Alabama National Guard trains nearby. In the United States, National Guard members have traditionally been considered part-time soldiers. Each state has its own guard, a domestic force commanded by the governor. In peacetime, the Guard is called up to aid in disaster relief. Hurricanes, fires, floods, and riots.
Meanwhile, 2,000 National Guard troops are in town to help patrol the streets and protect property.
But for the past 7 years, National Guard units from many states have been needed in battle. Units fight alongside the regular Army. Many have deployed to the war zones over and over again. The Alabama National Guard is one of the leaders in the fight. Since 9/11, more than 13,500 Guard members have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Right now, there are 285 men and women serving in Iraq. The Alabama Guard is second only to the state of Texas in total personnel deployed, a fact they're proud of. Major Shane Sparks, who served 14 months in Iraq, sees his service as part of a family tradition as well.
And one reason why I joined when I was younger, my dad was in the unit that I joined, of course, so we were a father-son in the same unit since then.
Your dad was in the same unit?
He was in the same unit. He went to Iraq in 2003. He just now retired recently. Both my grandfathers, one was in the Korean War and the other one was in World War II.
Sparks' last deployment in Iraq ended in September of 2007. Now he's training other Guard members for their upcoming duty. One lesson he is careful to impart is that for all the dangers citizen soldiers face on the battlefield, the transition back to civilian life at home can be devastating, even in a community in which many of their neighbors have had similar military experiences.
I really think that whenever a soldier comes back, they should take a lot of time off. You go for a year dictating orders, you can't treat everybody like that. And a lot of times that's hard for a lot of families to understand that the soldier's going through that.
Here in Anniston, there are those who have taken Major Sparks' admonition to heart. They are devoted to helping those who return from the battlefield adjust to life at home. Bob Pearl is a manager at the depot. A battlefield injury ended his military career. And the Wounded Warrior program at the depot has eased his transition back to civilian life. The program recruits soldiers who've had to retire from active duty and encourages them to join the depot workforce. He views working at the depot as a link with the Southern tradition of military service.
I think the people generally in the South, they're kind of raised with that spirit of selfless service and kind of God and country, you know, and it really means something. It impacts them, and they in turn take action. And the way they do that is they serve their country. They do it by joining the military. They do it by working at the Anniston Army Depot.
But a workforce composed mostly of veterans doesn't really satisfy the depot's needs. Managers want to recruit young workers, but they find themselves in competition with the Army. Many young people growing up in Anniston feel that's the most attractive career path open to them. The Army offers training and an opportunity to move out into the world, away from the restrictions of small-town life. To compete, the depot has set up a program in conjunction with the local high school. It's designed to train seniors in machine repair. If students stick with it for a year, do well, and get good grades, they could be guaranteed a job for life at the depot. In an economy where jobs are disappearing or getting exported with alarming regularity, it's a powerful incentive to buy in and stay put. It was a persuasive argument for high school senior Casey Gurley. She passed up a college scholarship to secure a job at the depot for the long term. And you played softball well enough to get a scholarship.
Yes, sir.
But you didn't take it.
No, sir.
Why?
Because I felt like this would be a better opportunity. I mean, if I went to college there, you wouldn't know. It was only a 2-year college. It was a community college. But I didn't know whether after that what I was going to do, you know, if I was going to have a job. And now I know I have a career until I retire. And I've already got a year under my belt to that, so.
Of course, the Army tries to snatch up students too. There's a very active ROTC chapter at the high school.
Is there a sense of competition? Is there recruiting at that level?
What I would tell you is that for Anniston, we don't consider ourselves to be in direct competition with an ROTC program. This is, after all, an Army organization, so a win or a recruit by ROTC versus a win or a recruit to our workforce here is considered a win-win for all.
Oh, you're young.
19-year-old Stacy Jackson is a recruiting poster come to life. Smart and dedicated to getting a good education, Jackson joined the ROTC in high school. It was an important part of his life. In just 3 years, he won every medal a recruit could earn. But the military wasn't his whole life. He was the drum major of the marching band and a leader in student government. Still, since his graduation last spring, Stacy continues to immerse himself in the military culture. Now he plans to attend a military college to become an officer in the Army.
And now the basketball team
Even the
has
prospect that
gained
military service will probably mean deployment to a war zone in Afghanistan or Iraq doesn't deter him.
Are you scared?
No, not really. Of course, there's the possibility that I may get injured or may lose my life there. But at the same time, it can happen here. So why not do it for something that's worth doing it for?
Do the kids in your high school talk about the war much?
Depending on who you're talking to, some of the cadets in the ROTC program had some parents who were deployed or had been deployed. And of course, we talked about it sometimes, and recruiters came and, you know, they were recruiting for the military or the branch that, of course, they were representing. And a lot of kids were like, well, I wouldn't go or I wouldn't be talking to a recruiter because, of course, of the war. So, yes and no.
What are most kids thinking about the war these days?
A lot of them are scared of it. A lot of them don't want to go into the military simply because of what they broadcast on the news, which is basically the death toll and the bombings and things of that nature. So a lot of them really doesn't see or have too much interest in the war.
How'd your family respond to you wanting to go military?
At first it was all no's.
What'd you think when you brought the recruiter home?
I was mad because I didn't want him to go into the service. I really didn't. But I've always been the type of parent that supported his decisions. I seen that he was adamant about it. No matter how I felt, he was adamant about it. And I'd rather be supportive than non-supportive. I'd rather see him do something positive than not positive.
Stacy's mom, Tina, is proud of her son, but it's a pride tempered by the realization that in Anniston, her son actually has very few options for a successful career.
And it's pretty much how it is here. It's just really, really military oriented. There's no other way to put it. I mean, when you think about all the major jobs here, the depot, Homeland Security, what does that tell you? Everything is centered around the military here.
She moved her family to Anniston from Chicago when Stacy was very young, in part to get away from the hazards of big city gang violence and drugs.
And to think that I moved from the inner city to try to keep my son alive and healthy and well, it's hard. I think about it a lot. We don't necessarily talk about it that much because I know he's very strong about the way he feels about the war, but I feel like I moved from one form of a war to another, you know? And I guess if in fact I have to lose my son to a war, I would rather it be a war for all and not some gang violence or some stupid stuff that's happening on the streets.
Tina Johnson is opposed to the war in Iraq, but she knows that whatever her political views, her son's safety could depend on the hard work of her neighbors working at the depot down the road.
There may come a point, though, in the coming few years where those vehicles that they're repairing over there are the vehicles that your son is riding in Iraq, which is a grave responsibility, if not for your son in a few years from now, but for all those sons now that that they have at the depot. So I think they feel maybe a personal connection, you know, to protecting those who are going to the war, but nonetheless, their money is tied to there being a war.
Exactly. I mean, somebody has to do the job, because regardless to whether there's a prevalent war going on or those little small wars that we don't hear about every day, we need people who are going to make sure that our people over there in the wars have the proper vehicles and nutrition and whatever else they may need. We have to have that, but does it have to be so bad? Do we have to lose so many children? I just could think of 1,000,001 other things that I would rather be doing with that money.
For much of the country, the battles in Iraq and Afghanistan are simply discussion points, abstract, distant. But here, war's a presence that's felt every day. It's a thread that runs through every aspect of this town, from the promise of jobs up the road to the prospect of tragic loss. Supporting the military is a way of life in this part of the country, but the struggle for Anniston is reconciling the reality of needing war to survive as a community. Living the American dream means security, stability, opportunity. But the price tag for that dream may be the nightmare of ongoing war far from these southern streets.